Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the SOMM TV podcast. My name is Jason Wise. On today's episode, we are going to speak with the owners of one of the, in my opinion, greatest restaurants in the world. And they were just named one of the 50 best restaurants in the world. They are Kyle and Katina Connaughton over at SingleThread Restaurant and Farms up in Healdsburg, California. This is an important restaurant for me because I had eaten there early on in my kind of journey when we created SOMM TV. And it was an immediate, I have to film with these people. Their ethos and the way that they handle food and the way they look at the environment and just how damn good what they make is, it inspired me to a massive level. And so the product of that is a new show we have on SOMM TV called Pairings. And I want to thank all of you viewers. You have made Pairings one of the most watched things we've ever released. It has blown up. And I just want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts because we worked so hard on this thing. More episodes are coming, but without further ado, let me speak to Kyle and Katina about owning a 3-star Michelin restaurant, the pressure that comes with that, and so much more. These are some of my favorite people in food. It is a tremendous honor. I mean, I think one thing I want to say before we talk, Kyle and Katina, I want to say that going to your restaurant when you first opened, I was invited to go there at a pre-service before you opened. And it was one of the, what I would call, you get these moments in your career where you look back and you think of, sometimes they're important. Sometimes you didn't know they were going to be important. This one I knew was going to be important, where I got to sit at your restaurant, witness a group of people who were, in retrospect, I'm sure you were nervous, didn't feel that way. And I'm sure that you were very, very concerned about how things were going to go. And that night was one of the driving forces of what I do as a profession today. And I know that sounds crazy, but it's true. The dinner I had at SingleThread, I was with Brian McClintock, who was in SOMM 1, and he could not stop talking about what this restaurant was going to be. And that is a conversation. Yeah, it's a conversation I've had with a lot of people, professionals and not. And it's 50-50 whether that turns out to be the case. This was one of the most incredible meals of my entire career. And probably what I'm getting at is I sort of blame you guys for where I am. I think maybe a little bit, and it's your fault. No, I'm just kidding. I think
we take a lot of blame.
And you should.
Very flattering. Thank you.
Well, it all leads right now to, look, we started when we started SOMM TV, we thought, how can we make a food show that is at the absolute top of production value with the right people, with the right kind of message, but also make it something that's in line with what we're doing. And I basically wouldn't have done this show if we could not have done you guys as the premiere. And Pairings is the show I speak of. And I just have to say, for you guys to trust us when we started this means a lot to me because it was a startup network at the time, and we were knee deep in chaos. And you guys believed in this show. And then I don't want to say that a lot of stuff got in the way, but COVID and fires and a number of things got in the way. But I do want to ask you, just for my own personal thing, what did you think of Pairings, the show that is now airing on SOMM TV with you guys as the premiere? What did you think?
Yeah, well, that was a lot, and that's amazing. And we were honored really to be, a part of it. And we love to be at the sort of genesis of something new, as you know, and always be sort of pushing to try new things. And when you came to us with the idea, it's something, right, that we live with every day. It's something that we're talking about, we're working on. It's a big part of our internal conversation. It's also a big part of our conversation with the guests, but the process of what we do is not really something that the guest sees. They see the result. They don't really see so much the process. So it was amazing to collaborate with you, and we were really honored to work with it and to be the first episode. And now that it's out and our team and people have seen it, it's been really great to interact. And right before we did this, actually, just had a conversation because we're actually in service right now. So going into service tonight with one of our really, really great captains, like one of the amazing rising stars here at SingleThread. And he said he watched it after service, and he said it reinforced so many things for him. And actually he took away things that he's now working into his highlights and some of the things that are reinforced for him, for the guests. So it was nice to have the inside-outside reception and have that conversation, but I think it came out beautifully.
Yeah, definitely. And then always when our story is told through the lens of somebody else, it's just always a really interesting thing for us to view or to hear. And I think that what you did was you tied our story together just so beautifully and so thoughtfully. And I have a hard time watching myself on camera. But I really enjoyed it. I really loved it. It was a really well told love story through all of the things that mean so much to us. So we just appreciate it so much.
Is it not scary to hand your story over to somebody else? I mean, honestly, I feel terrified when I get a story like yours. And I have to figure out how do I do that in 30 minutes? I mean, it's really challenging. So I was afraid. You guys weren't afraid for how this was going to turn out?
I think
we know you. We trust you. I mean, that's the thing is we don't. I mean, we kind of, as you know, a big part of the single thread experience, what we do for the guests that they come in our experiences, it is a story. It's a narrative. We focus a lot on the menu as the narrative, and we're trying to ride that line about telling that narrative, telling that story, telling the story of today. This is what is happening. The food, the floral, everything that you're having through the lens of really Katina and the farm told by us in the restaurant and bringing that all together. And you kind of have to ride that balance of there's so many stories to tell about our produce, about the seasons, about our methods, about our approach, about our cooking techniques, about the dishware, about the artisans behind everything that we do, the ingredients, why we do a dish, what's trying to tell creatively, and of course the pairings, and then what's happening with the wine and sake and all those things. And so you have so much to share, but the guest is there to enjoy an experience, right? They're not there to be at like a university lecture. And so you have to like layers of information, with that story, just like you. It's like the editing you do, right? You capture so much footage and then you have to edit something down into X amount of minutes, or hours of the work that you do. And you think, what are the essential parts to tell the story accurately and beautifully, and for people to want to know more. And that's the same sort of thing that we do. And so there are so many different aspects of the story through our agriculture and hospitality and the creativity and all these kinds of things. And as you know, we've been together for 30 years. So we have this long kind of story together, about that. So when you do hand it over to someone to tell aspects of it, I don't know if it's scary, but it is just, that it's right and correct. There's a lot of different like sort of layers to it. Of course, you can't tell, and you don't need to tell all of them. But anyways, we, the three of us, we've had this long relationship together, so us really well. And then so it's like when the storyteller really knows the story, that is when you feel comfortable. So there was no part in this process where I felt nervous at all that it wasn't going to be accurate, or it wasn't going to, feel quite right, or it wasn't going to be accurate representation of us, when it comes with you.
There's a strange thing with your restaurant. And I think people expect places at the level you guys are at to have some type of tension or, just this, you guys don't have that. There's an open kitchen. I've been to many places that are really revered and they have an open kitchen, but there's a tension. It's beautiful. Everything's precise, but there's something about your kitchen that does not have any of that, which makes it both challenging to make a narrative because you want some tension, but also really beautifully open to the way you can move around in a kitchen. It's just different. I don't know how to put it in words other than I have probably filmed, no joke, if you're listening to this podcast, I have filmed in 150 really, really important kitchens minimum in my career, and then probably another 300 kitchens that would be interesting. I find your kitchen is almost a damned if you do, damned if you don't. I filmed in there and I'm like, now I want every kitchen to feel like this. We can set up time-lapse rigs, try to be responsible, not be in the way. But there's something about the way you guys operate that is interesting. And the idea that you're husband and wife, and I want to get to that later, but it's a perfect transition to you, Katina. I think the episode comes together when we started filming with you. It's one thing to be in a kitchen. It's one thing to be with a chef, a sous chef, a sommelier, these necessary components. But I don't know that people think about a farm as being a necessity. And I don't know how your restaurant would you guys are SingleThread farm I mean, it's interesting. Why do you need a farm? I want to ask a question that seems like a stupid question, but to me, it's integral to why we made the episode. Why a farm? Why do you need that?
Well, this is a story about a husband and a wife, and these are not just roles that we play as chef and farmer that pertain to this restaurant. This is who we are, our authentic selves as humans. I'm a farmer. I'm a big part of this equation. So it is just such a massive piece of our heart. It's really what drives us. It keeps us rooted in humility and all of the wonderful things that we just hold so dear. It all starts at the farm, and so the story is just.
Did you always know?
Yeah.
Did you always know you were going to be a farmer? I mean, Kyle, when I spoke to
No.
him off camera, and I mean, I've known Kyle for years. He was kind of always like, I want to be a chef, or I want to tell a narrative through food. Where did you start? I think your story is incredibly interesting.
Yeah, no, I didn't always know. In fact, I grew up in LA. I grew up in the suburbs. I didn't really have any connection to my food system growing up. And I met Kyle at such a young age. And food was so important to him and to his family. And so it just started to open my eyes up to, just how beautiful that can be. And it really took us moving out of the country to a very rural agricultural island, Hokkaido, Japan, where I was surrounded by agriculture, and it just spoke to me, and I really started to connect with the importance of how our food is grown and where it's coming from, and the seasonality aspect of what food means to us and how amazing it is when it is at the peak of its season. And then I carried that to England, where I continued to work and study it. And then that brought us back to California, where I stuck my hands in the earth, and I just I felt like the best version of myself. So it was a little bit later in life where I discovered that this was my calling, but it just all started to make sense. This is who we are. This is how we can best collaborate, and this is just how we can bring something really special to each other and to our team and to our guests.
Yeah, the idea of the farm, right, evolved as part of a long sort of like journey to have this and a long conversation of living in Japan and living in Europe and traveling around and having different experiences and seeing what we connected with. And so, but we always knew we wanted to be in Healdsburg. We always knew we wanted to be here in Sonoma County. And then the farm just evolved so naturally into the picture over the years. And then, to so much so that it became like the essential driving factor. I mean, it drives everything sort of ethically that we do, everything sort of hospitality wise, and certainly everything creatively. As chef, I was like embarking in this career as a chef to go work at these amazing 3-star restaurants, with very, very creative chefs who were like pushing the boundaries and was like really at the sort of forefront of like what was possible, especially kind of like through that like modernist cuisine era. And, really trying to understand what my creative voice was going to be. And in the end, it turned out like my creative voice was really to interpret what Katina was doing from a farmer. And I really realized that it was just more about being the conduit between her and the guest, and then allowing that to drive everything creatively rather than thinking, okay, what's a dish that I want to do? And now let's go and find, the ingredients. It's like, these are the ingredients that I have that are at their best, that she's the most excited about, and what are we going to create with them? So it's a totally different way to think about it as a chef. And it's shaped so much of our culture as a restaurant, and certainly our kitchen culture of what we do. But also like going back to what you said in terms of like just the way the restaurant is and the kitchen is like, we're inviting you over to a dinner party in our home. And this is what we're cooking tonight. And we're there to take care of you, understand your dietary restrictions, your allergies and aversions, and your celebrations, and to really create that experience, for you. And so you take a lot of ego out of that, and you really become, there for the guests to experience the best that you can possibly give them. And I think it's just, we just do it in a different way where we take out the things. Of course, we have a lot of, pressure, and we have very, very high standards, and, we kind of know in that vein of things, like what's at stake, but we stay like really to the mission, which is to really have this sort of like feeling of like, this is a dinner party tonight, and downstairs right now, or upstairs on the second floor, and downstairs right now, there's guests that are arriving to our home for a dinner party. And that's the way we look at every day here.
Walk me through your like daily schedule here, because I really want to get to the end of like, what do you actually eat for dinner? And I am totally understanding of the fact that your dinner might be the time of not a normal person's dinner, but what does your day look like? How do you start your day? Both of you guys can talk over each other, but I'm curious, how does it look for you two as a couple, right?
Yeah.
When does it start?
You could say your schedule. We have slightly different schedules.
Kyle shook a little bit right there. I like that.
Yeah. Unless we're like on the road doing traveling, it's pretty, it's pretty much, I don't want to say it's the same every day.
Do you have stasis? You actually have a schedule? Like you drop the kids off in the morning and you have breakfast. And
our kids are grown up, our kids are 21 and 27. So, Katina gets up early, she's off to the farm. We'll generally have, sort of like coffee together in bed. And we talk about that, because we try not to talk about, I have to say work, because it's not work. We don't say, oh, this is work and not work. It's just life. This is our life. We try not to talk about sort of work-related things before bed, because we could just talk forever about all kinds of things, creative or problems that need to be solved or whatever. So we kind of usually have, a fairly early morning debrief over coffee, and Katina's gets the dogs and is off, to the farm. I generally like schedule all of my calls and emails and things like that to the morning. And then for me, it's over to the restaurant, and, we have a pretty big team, and we have over 200 people now on our team in total, between the two restaurants and the farm and the inn. And so, it's always a series of meetings and trying to move things forward and conversations and initiatives forward. That's a big part of the day. We have Little Saint now, which is our more casual, vegan restaurant. That's also a cafe and a venue and a wine shop and all kinds of things. So, during the day for me, it's really about having FaceTime with the team and seeing all the different people and making those rounds and getting face to face to make sure that, all things are sort of being dealt with and we're kind of moving everything forward. And then in the evening for me, it's being in service and, observing service and expediting and talking to guests and seeing the chefs and checking the food. And then, we're also in there with Marley, the head chef, and, some of the other chefs, like developing dishes. And, sometimes it's happening during service and sometimes before service. And, we have a lot of creative sessions and out visits to the farm. And so it's like the routine is that there is a routine and there isn't. But, in restaurant life, you're anchored to service, like, right. Everything is like, we're at a very specific time. Lineup is at 1:15 in the kitchen. It's at 1:30 with the whole staff. Family meal is at 2:45, like the doors open at 4, right? And that is what having grown up always working in restaurants since I was a teenager, right? It's like that sort of, the routine of that is so great, because there's no question like, what are we doing today? Or I don't really feel like it today, or maybe I'll kind of coast, or maybe like, you have that every day, right? Every day at 4:00, it is going to begin that 64 guests are going to walk through that door, and you need to be ready. So there's something really great about anchored to that. And you probably feel the same way, with the harvest. The harvest is every day. It's every morning, starts every morning at the same time, 6 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
harvesting vegetables,
Yeah,
So.
no, absolutely. But we know that no matter what happens with all these moving parts, as Kyle said, that we know guests walk in the door at 4 p.m. So no matter what is happening, all those moving parts have to work in harmony at that moment. And every day we tend to make it happen.
Yeah, it has to happen.
Yeah,
right?
It has to happen.
Guests come through; they have a very high expectation, as they should. And Katina's dealing with the natural world, so there's an ebb and flow, right? And then we could have a really, really cold night and wake up in the morning and there's like frost, and that's changed something out on the farm, or like all of a sudden there's like some there was some insect or some pest or something, right? Like we have to be able to sort of like roll with those punches, all the time. That being said, we have really good systems and we're not caught off guard, but we are dealing with the natural world and things are changing, right? It's like we may be on a schedule, but nature is not, right? So it's like, when we can't say, oh, exactly, the tomatoes are going to ripen on this day, so be ready. You have to watch. You have to prepare. And there's something really sort of beautiful, almost like the intricacy and a little bit of like the danger that's involved. And say, like, we don't call up a supplier and say, deliver this produce, and then it just shows up and we deal with the quality. Like, we have it or we don't. The quality is there or it's not, and we have to pivot. There's no safety net, right? There's no backup plan. You have to be able to sort of like maneuver, and you have to be able to put dishes on the menu that, are appropriate on the 3 Michelin star, menu. And I think that sort of constant, sort of free fall, it's never done. You're never set. The menu's never good. It's just constantly you get one dish on the menu and then you start the next thing. You always talk about like painting the Golden Gate Bridge, right? They like paint the Golden Gate Bridge from one side to the other. As soon as they get to the other side, they just paint it, they go again, right? It's like once you get something done and you go, great, and you look back and you go, okay, job well done, you just have to start over. Like basically once you get a dish on the menu, you have to start developing its replacement. Like that's how it works.
Did you guys ever watch a show called Fraggle Rock? Do you remember that show?
Oh, yeah.
Do you really remember that show?
Up with
Of
Fraggle
course.
Rock.
There
Not
was
where
like
I thought you were going to go next, but
yeah.
sure. I can't wait to hear the tie-in.
There's the
the
dozers,
doozers.
Oh.
the
doozers.
little
Yeah,
doozers.
yeah.
And, people would wreck their stuff and they were happy because they got to rebuild it. And everybody was confused. Why do you want to keep doing it? They're like, that's our job. We like to build. And
And the Fraggles ate it and the doozers built it. Yeah, that's the guests eat it and we build it.
Yeah.
Because
When
it
the
tasted
floods
like
come.
sugar or whatever.
Yeah. Got it.
I just think it's a funny thing to think, like, the way you describe this is a lesson to everybody listening who works in restaurants, who is frustrated, me making films or whatever the hell is it, whatever I do, I'm not sure. And but you do these things and you think, I'm going to get to the end, and you forget that what you're doing is why you wanted to do it. And what you're describing is something that I just hope, because I need you to be as happy as you sound. I need it for you guys. I need it because
we are.
Don't worry.
Yeah, of course. It's challenges all the time, right? But it's and we've had, as you know, we've had so many challenges with the wildfires. We had our own kitchen fire, closed us down for 2.5 months. Of course, we're all dealing with the impacts of COVID. And right, it's not been without we've had floods on our old farm and a couple wildfires and evacuation.
Oh we just had like the trifecta of environmental events.
Sometimes multiple things happening at one time, but we are all. I think we've become very good at crisis management, and we always, as you've seen, we always tend to find a real creative solution, and then ultimately you go, oh, even if this was a problem I wish I didn't have to solve for, the creative solution, we go, oh, that was great. We learned a lot from that. The whole Usuzan project, you got to see some of the results of that in pairings, with the hot pots and the smoked, the smoked black cod dish. Like actually these dishes were born creatively. The assemble yourself, dish that we did for pairings with the smoked, with the smoked fish, right? It's like, that was actually born out of like a sort of COVID related, getting people interacting at the table, because we don't like to have just individually plated dishes and that's all you get, where sure you're around the same table, but everyone's getting their own food. We like to have these interactive moments where guests are participating in something. And, that was something that creatively came out of like, people feel comfortable to be around each other. Like, let's let them interact. Let's let them build something together. Let's make these hot pots because let's people share in this very warm and sort of nurturing, thing. So, even challenges can lead to a lot of really great creative breakthroughs.
Yeah,
I think the 3 dishes that you guys picked in this show are tremendously both accessible and incredibly beautiful. It was a really, really amazing experience to have, what essentially is a soup, right? You guys made something that anybody can relate to, anybody could want. It doesn't matter where you're at. economically or where you live or anything. You want that. And when it comes to, as Rusty says, not to demean what it is, but an incredible Japanese fish taco, like the best fish taco you could have.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, everybody can relate to that kind of a thing. So
totally.
Mm-hmm. It's approachable.
Right. It's approachable. And those dishes in particular, given the time that we shot that, right, they were really, they're very much of their time, given the fact of like where we were and where we had come from, with COVID in the restaurant, but also then also timeless, that like you won't look back, I think, on that in a couple of years and maybe watch the episode and be like, oh God, remember when we used to do, that. And it's just more of like, maybe we won't necessarily be doing those things, but you look at and say, yeah, those are really timeless. And I think that's a big part of driving our cuisine from the farm, is that there's a timelessness about it. And, as you know, from my career, I spent, years cooking in Japan, and, I focused a lot of my career on very, very traditional Japanese cuisine, which there's a timelessness to it because the history is so long. There's a slow evolution of dishes, but, these things are tried and true, and you go back to them seasonally every year. And working for Michel Bras, who created food, who has a book now that's 25 years old. And if I show that to a cook now and say, hey, this book just came out, check it out, they would think that it was new because it's so timeless. And then I went to go work with the Fat Duck during the early 2000s in the real sort of like big boom of the modernist cuisine era where a lot of things in food were rapidly changing. And we were talking to scientists, and we were talking to professors and perfumiers and all kinds of different people. And we were learning new ingredients and interpretations of all kinds of things and trying to tell new stories and new narratives. And the thing is and that was really fun and really amazing. But what happens with a lot of cuisine that's very avant-garde and cutting edge, just like anything with fashion or art and music, when you're on that really avant-garde sort of cutting edge, it's very much of its time. And, you could look back and say, yeah, that's still good, but you won't necessarily look back and say that everything is as relevant. And one thing, us being really tied to, with the farm, is really try to create dishes and try to create experience that has a timelessness about it. Of course, we'll continue to evolve the dishes. We'll continue to push the cuisine forward, but it's not really our goal to be like the most cutting edge. And we came up with this technique or this type of dish. It's really about creating really delicious food that is a reflection of the farm and the season. And then one season now that we're 5 years old leads into the next. And there becomes this evolution and the flow. And it's really about the conversation between the kitchen and the farm. That's what kind of creates this timelessness.
And I just want to add to that. I think something that's important is that what you do is you take this beautiful product from the farm and you honor it. So you're not manipulating it. And I think the less manipulation with pretty much anything will equate to more timelessness.
Yeah, it's true.
It's just,
but that sounds so easy.
It sounds so easy, but it took years to figure that out. Oddly, even it being right in your face, and not to say like there was like a one day epiphany, but it's like almost had to come full. For me, at least, I needed to come full circle with that idea of. I started my career in LA with amazing people like Suzanne Goyen and these like former Chez Panisse, people at Campanile and Luke and Spago and all these places, young in my career in sushi bars where they were so tied to it. So it got instilled, and then it had to go out, and then Japan it was instilled, and then you have to go explore different things, and you end up really coming back full circle, but then also moving it forward. But now I think the most rewarding thing is like instilling that in terms of our approach to mentorship, with our team, for the future, is like looking about it, not just from a creative standpoint and like the storytelling, but like what it means, like environmentally and, what we do and the steps that we take, because now it isn't just like getting great ingredients and making delicious dishes. Of course, that is what we are here to do, but we're thinking about what our impact is and what our story is and what our influence is and, what sort of message that we're sharing and that we're telling. But most importantly, like these young people that are coming and starting their careers with us who have their whole lives ahead of them, like what's their future and how can we better prepare them for a future where we'll be, we'll be older, we'll be retired, and they'll be the ones out there who will be pushing things forward. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that we think about now.
Yeah, and how can we influence and nurture that next generation of thoughtful leaders? That's the impact we want to have. That's the question we ask ourselves.
It makes total sense. Katina, are your kids going to do this? Are you guys going to push them into your profession, or what is the thought?
Oh no, we would never push them into anything. I think that could result poorly. However, I think that naturally one of our daughters is gravitating into the culinary world. Both of our daughters are musicians, and one really discovered the joy of feeding others, and the joy that cooking brings her, and it brings everyone around her. So we'll see where that path takes her.
Yeah, she's been cooking in Boston. She actually went to Boston to go to music school, and then, with sort of pandemic related, inability for them to be in person school, she kind of like transitioned, and her life and her path, changed, and she started making pasta, doing all these things. And she decided she wanted to go work in a restaurant and like make pasta. And so very different than what we do at SingleThread. But of course she's got that sort of like ethos. And our older daughter is a florist at SingleThread, but she's definitely going a much more like academic path in her world, much more literary, which is great. I mean, we had our kids when we were very young, and they grew up and they really saw the hard, they really got to grow up in like, wow, dad's working like insane. And, it's like mom's like building her career. Like they got to see, like they've seen the like less glamorous side. It's great that they're getting to enjoy a lot of like the benefits that have come for all the hard work, because they put in a lot of it too as well. But they have, right. Like for them, there's like, they know what it goes to in there. There's no glossy cover to what it is. Like they've seen the sheer amount of work.
Yeah, there is no easy way to do this. No possible. I think there's some parallels with what I do, maybe not at the level which you guys do, but there is it's not given to you. It doesn't, none of this is given. I will say really fast, as an aside, the flowers are sort of talked about quickly in the episode of Pairings, Katina, what you do. And it's an astounding thing to think you are not just a farmer, but your flowers and your work as I guess as a florist. Is that right? What would you say? What is that?
Yeah,
title is astounding. It's amazing what you do. It really is.
Thanks. I love floral design. Florals speak to me in a way that nothing else really does. And I think that beauty is so integral to our lives, and floral flowers are they're such an important part of that. And so I just love it. We love to bring the outdoors in. It really helps to anchor our guests to their sense of place, to the time in the season, and just to really connect with nature. And I just think it's so important. It's such a big part of what we love to do, and we love to share that with guests. But I love flowers so much. It's
tremendous. That's just my wanting to call that out, because it really is one of these things that flowers are one of those things that you subconsciously and consciously notice, but I think the subconscious is even more important. You go into a bathroom, there's flowers everywhere. You just feel better when you come out. The way it's designed, I mean, it's an amazing thing. It's really, really tremendous.
Yeah, I agree.
It's also a part of our storytelling, right? It's not just beauty for the sake of beauty and putting something that's not relevant to the season or the place, right? It's like, these are flowers that Katina is growing, or she's gathering from the wild, or her friends, another floral farmer that she's close with is growing, and they're there to tell the story about today just as much as the food is, right? It's like the food and the ingredients are definitely telling the story of today, but that's the multi-sensory aspects of the storytelling, which obviously in what you do, you can appreciate, is like, that's what you deal with every day, is like telling a story in a sort of a multi-sensory, way. And that's what we do as well, right? It's like our experience, the 3-hour experience, is not unlike, watching a film or reading a novel or listening, to a kind of composed piece of music, right? The narrative of our menu and the experience is very much, thought about in that same way. Each dish is a chapter or an act or, an overture or whatever. And we think about what each dish does in the menu individually, and then the sum of the parts at the whole. So if we have something that's really, really, rich and decadent, after that, you'll have something a little bit more acidic and bright and cleansing, and right, these things. And obviously, especially, I mean, we haven't really talked about wine here, but it's this progression of beverages and wines and how it all works together. So you have to consider a lot of things in this, like in any good story that's told. And if we're trying to tell that story of today, and this is today, this moment in time, and you can come back 3 weeks from now, 3 months from now, 3 years from now, and we'll in the same context, we'll be telling you a different story about that day and that moment. The floral is a big part of that narrative and storytelling, because it's Katina's view from the outside brought in just as much as anything else.
Well, I have to say the stuff that I do has a lot more swear words than yours. Sadly. A couple more quick things. I mean, yeah, behind the scenes for sure. I worked in restaurants for a long time, and it's I would say SOMM TV is representative of how people, at least as much as we can, how people really talk behind the scenes. We try. I want to ask. This is going to sound like a stupid question, but it's one that I think anyone listening wants to know the answer to. Do the two of you have a meal, a thing that was, we ask people about a glass of wine, a bottle, a thing that changed their life all the time. And I'm wondering if it's a wine or a meal or an experience where you said, okay, this is the moment I'm going to do this. I'm going to change things. I see things different. Do you two have something like that?
Like in particular, like one that we shared in together, or?
Yeah. Or just for you, like maybe it could be as simple as, you had a meal in Japan by yourself or with your wife, or something where you said, this is the epiphany meal. Do you have something that changed you or made you?
I mean, for me, when I decided that I wanted to be a chef and I wanted to focus on Japanese cuisine in particular, it was like very easy. I can picture it very vividly. And I was 9 years old. My dad had just been in Japan for business for a couple of weeks, and he spent a lot of time in Japan as a kid growing up. And he came back from a particularly long time in Japan. And so we were catching up, went on a little father and son kind of like ski trip together. I was 9 years old, and he was trying to explain, he had brought all this cool stuff back from Japan. And he was like, oh, I'll take you, and had seen that there was a sushi bar. So we sat at the sushi bar together, and I watched the chef and slicing the fish and making the sushi and stuff. And I loved it. I didn't want to get up. I just wanted to keep eating. I wanted to keep seeing. And like from there, I was just so fascinated. And, I wasn't a kid that played, sports, and, we didn't have this like father-son sports thing that was like not a part of our conversation at all. My parents are both from the UK, and it was not something I was interested in. And that like kind of became like our kind of family thing and father and son thing. And then my parents started having Japanese foreign exchange students come and live with us, and we ate, a lot. And then, eventually, we traveled, and Katina and I started, sort of like traveling there together. But yeah, it's, I'm sure I would have found it, but that meal in particular, like I can trace right back and be like, yep, that was the exact moment. And I was like, whatever that is, whatever this thing is, like, that's what I want to do. And of course, like young people would say, that's like never going to happen. Like you're not, that sounds kind of, now there's so much access, but before that was a very closed world, and people were like, no, that's probably never going to happen. But actually my parents were really, really encouraging to me. I went to Japanese culinary school and, all those kinds of things, but I can trace it back to that one meal. We've obviously together, in our 30-year history, we've had a lot of, meals and experiences, together that I think have really, really shaped the way that we look at things, in particular hospitality. And probably the ones that are the most impactful for us, like, didn't even necessarily happen at a restaurant,
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah. I think you're describing something. I have two daughters. They're both young. All I pray for them is that they have passion. I don't care. For me, it's like they incessantly want to study dinosaurs, or they love grass, or they love instruments, or I just want them to love something deeply,
Sure.
Yeah.
And you're describing to be 9 years old and to taste sliced fish and to think, I love this. I love it. I don't know how to communicate it, but I want to do this. And looking back, you know it, but at the time it was clearly true. This is all I wish for my kids. I just want them so badly. And it doesn't access, you mentioned something about access, and I think that is so important, but it's a nurturing thing. If you're ready to receive passion, and that's all obviously access, if you don't have it, you can't act on that. But there is an element of that spark, and that is an incredible story. I love that.
It's about exposing, right? And it's rare, and little kids are not going to necessarily find at 9 years old what their life's work going to be, right? That's sort of maybe 1 in 100,000 that happens.
It's also okay if it happens when you're 36. That's okay.
Yeah,
too.
Of course.
Honestly,
and I think we equate a lot passion and these kinds of things with profession, and it doesn't necessarily always have to be what you do, but just passion in general. I think that's, now that our kids are growing up too, it's I agree. We look at it as we want them to be happy, and surround themselves with things and people that they love. How that factors in professionally is kind of a slightly different conversation, right?
Yeah. I definitely agree. I think I have a different path altogether than you, which I love, but I definitely was a late bloomer in that respect. And I think I tried to grow up way too quickly being a young mother, and I carried a lot of heaviness with me. And it wasn't until my very early 30s I shed a lot of that, and I started to kind of see things through the eyes of a 9-year-old and all of these flavors and textures and the smell of roses, everything just seemed so much more powerful and continues to ignite that fire in me with each experience. So I think it's so interesting that you found that so young. Mm-hmm. I found that later in life, but we still carry that same passion with us. In equal measure.
No, for sure. I mean, Katina, your story is just marvelous, because I want people to understand. I mean, Kyle, you are one of the world's greatest chefs, and I'll ask my last question here in a second. But Katina, I don't think the restaurant or the ethos you guys have, or your relationship with your customers and the guests, how you say, I don't think it exists without you. I just don't think it's a possibility. And you are something that is tremendous to have found, that you are so good at what you do at, look, it's not like you were 90 when you found it. You were not at all. You were still a young woman, but it's still a really inspiring thing to see how damn good you are at your job. I mean, honestly, anyone who's eaten there and eaten the product that you grow, it's Mozart level. And so that's what we tried so hard in pairings, which there's no way to succeed in what I'm saying right now, but just to show how important the wine, the food, and the product that goes into both of those things from a standpoint of your farm makes what you guys make. And I say this with total humility. I am talking to two people who were instrumental in my career, wanting to do what I do. And I'm saying this flat out. I know that you guys live this every day. Guests come in at every time, but it's a tremendous thing. And I hope people listening who want to either be in wine or be in food or just whatever it is you want to do, it's totally doable. It's a strange thing, but you got to do the work, I guess.
That means
you
the
have
world
to do the
to
work.
us. Yeah. Thank you
have
so
to do the
much.
work.
Yeah, and you got to go all in.
You gotta love it.
Yeah, you got to love it. If you do find that passion and you do want to make it, your life's work, you gotta go all in on it. There's a lot of conversation right now, as there should be, about the work-life, sort of balance things. And we agree with that. And you need that too. And that's a big part of it, because your passion can easily also burn you up and burn you out. And we've seen that, before. And so you have to have balance, you have to have joy and happiness and relationships. And it takes a lot to do that. But, you also have to really go in on it. You don't halfway decide, to be an Olympic athlete and halfway decide you'll kind of train, to try to get onto the podium and get that gold medal, right? It's we all know and we respect and we love these stories about people who, who go all in, but it doesn't always have to be going all in on just your work, but just, on your life. And this is our life. And we love it. We don't think about it as work. And people say, oh, do you take time off? And you do that. It's like, we don't really think about it like that. It's not, like work is life and life is work. And, and there's a lot of joy in working. And there's also ways that we get, a way that helps us reset. And it's, there aren't these big divisions, in our life. We try to think about it a little bit more holistically.
Yeah, and I think you do just need to find your joy. And as long as you walk through life with the mindset that you're trying to live each day just a little bit better than the one before, then it continues to carry you on a wonderful path.
Yeah.
And you have to adapt.
You have to adapt. And that's the everyday, as you know, from spending a lot of time around SingleThread, right? Our daily mantra is about good change. Like Kaizen, this Japanese idea of the way that we interpret, that term is just really about good change, incremental good change, right? You can't just one day wake up and say, today I'm going to do everything completely differently. It's all about incremental good change to try to get a good result. Trying to do everything a little bit better, a little bit more thoughtfully, with better intent, with a better result. And that's the kind of way that we live. And I think if we didn't break it down and look at it that way, it would be very easy for all of us to become very overwhelming.
Yeah, well, I'm going to call you sometime and help me coach myself, because you're describing something that I do not have balance with. But
it's tough.
It really is. It is
very
tough,
hard.
and it's different for everybody.
I've decided I want you to raise my kids. I'm going to drop them off up in Sonoma here.
Bring them to the
That's
farm.
what we need.
You guys
Add
seem
them
like
to the
you
pile.
have extra time, and you guys have. I know you have service starting here soon, so I'm just going to ask. You were, first of all, huge congratulations for being named one of the 50 best restaurants in the world. That just happened, and
Thank you.
I am. It's like obvious you should have been, and you're a 3-star Michelin restaurant. Do these things make it hard for you to change your menu? Do they put more pressure on you? What do they do? I know you need them. I know they're incredible. They're the top of the top. But do they make it hard for you to adapt?
No, they don't at all. I mean, right, having these things, but what we do, it requires a lot of trust on the part of our guest, right? They don't select things. They don't choose things. We don't tell them what they're having. We get their dietary restrictions, and then we go from there. And so there's a lot of trust that's put in, right? Because most restaurants, you go in and you make choices and you decide what you're going to eat, what you're going to drink, and all of these things. And so, there's a lot of trust that's given to us, and those things really help in building that trust. And they're great. They're great for that. But it is possible, and I've definitely been there and seen that. It's like you start to get all these accolades, and it actually makes you more fearful for change, because when you were on your like rise up or whatever, however people want to see it, right? You're like taking chances and taking risks and creating something new in narrative, and then you sort of get everything you ever wanted, and it's really easy to be like, oh, don't change everything. And I used to work for S. and Blumenthal, and at the Fat Duck, and he used to say, when we got number 1 restaurant in the world on 50 Best that year, he was like, it's a pat on the back and a punch in the stomach, right? Because it's like, good job. And now the expectations for everyone is like becomes this almost unrealistic, unfathomable. And I was the head of R&D in those years, and it was incredible amount of pressure on me, because it was like my job to, come up with / institute and deliver the next, idea and the next dish that everyone's going to talk about. And right. It's like, you can get that writer's block. You can get those, like that sophomore kind of, like your second album after a hit album, right? It's like all these things like we know that, can very, very easily happen. And I think we knew that, coming into this, and we knew what the level we wanted to operate and what we were going to be capable of, and put together a good team.
Why we do.
But it's not, that's not why. It's not why we do what we do. So we never made that our why. And we just said, look, we're going to do what we feel is right and what the guest wants and what we want for the guest. And then, if we do that authentically and we really feel that we're doing it for those reasons, then everything will fall into place. And it has. And, staying consistent to that. And anytime you feel yourself stepping outside of that and you sort of like realize that maybe you're making a creative decision or something like that, that's a little bit more about that. I mean, it's okay to use those as standards to say like, is this a 3-star Michelin dish? Like, does this meet that, criteria? It's totally fine to ask yourself that and set that as a standard and like benchmark that when you're looking at something. But at the same time, creatively, like our mission on a daily basis is to make sure that we make the guests that are in that dining room happy. And some of them will be Michelin inspectors that we don't even know about. And some of them are 50 best voters or whatever. But, mostly it's just people who are in there celebrating a birthday or an anniversary. And we're there to make those guests happy. And if they're happy and we're authentically and genuinely making them happy, everything else will fall into place. And that sounds obvious, right?
You don't get a tip off if someone's coming in to rate your stuff, right? Never.
Of course not. Never.
You're not like in some alley paying somebody 50.
We've stopped trying to.
No.
Early on, you'd really try to be like, I think maybe table 12 is an inspector. It's like they're asking these kinds of questions, and I'm getting this kind of. We've just stopped doing that.
No.
We do our thing.
We also just don't want to place those labels on our guests. I mean, so we just assume everybody is of the utmost importance. Everyone is a 50 best voter or a Michelin inspector or, the dearest person that we want to provide the most wonderful memory for. Like, it doesn't matter. We just want everybody to.
Everyone deserves to be treated like that, right?
Absolutely.
I will say, when I showed up with that mustache, you guys treated me really well.
Yeah. And the French accent. Yeah.
It was a pretty bad accent, but it was supposed to be French. So I'm glad you recognized that. You guys,
so
it means the world to me to have you on the pod. I know I've gone over our time, and my apologies for that. But if you have, I know SingleThread is for a lot of people a place that you go for a celebration or it's a big event. I would say I can't overemphasize how worth it that is. These restaurants like yours are very important, and it's a tremendous opportunity for us to film that episode. So thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really, thank you.
All right. Well, you guys have stuff to do tonight, so I will let you go. And I hope that you're going to the farm, and Kyle, you're going to go be nice to everyone in the kitchen. So that sounds good.
Tonight. Yeah, I've got a flower harvest.
Yeah.
All right, you two. We will talk soon, and everyone can see them on pairings right now. All right, bud.
Thank you so much.
All right, you too. I hope you all enjoyed that conversation. Please go to SOMMTV.com, subscribe, and if you are a subscriber, check out pairings and know that we have more episodes coming. I've heard from a lot of you guys that you've actually watched this episode multiple times, and I just want you to know, as creators, all of us on our team really appreciate the feedback. So don't stop tweeting, don't stop sharing on Instagram. If you love the show, please let us know. And also, if you love this podcast, give it a good review. That also matters to us big time. This episode was produced by Nadine Netman and mixed by John Adams, as always. And we really appreciate you listening. Go to SOMMTV.com to get SOMM TV, everybody. Please be safe. Bye-bye.